All right, folks, gather round. We're about to dive into the greatest story ever told. No, not the Fast and the Furious franchise. I'm talking about Jesus of Nazareth. This guy's tale has everything: drama, miracles, plot twists, and a comeback that puts Rocky Balboa to shame. It's the ultimate underdog story, and it's been captivating audiences for over 2,000 years. Now you might be wondering, Trevor, why should I care about some dude who lived 2 millennia ago? Well, let me tell you, this isn't just any dude. This is the guy who inspired billions of people, shaped entire civilizations, and gave up everything to save a lost world. Not bad for a carpenter from a small town in the Middle East, right? Jesus' story is like the OG viral sensation, spreading across the world long before we had TikTok or Instagram. So, buckle up, folks. We're about to embark on a journey through time, exploring the life of a man who changed the world. Let's dive in and see why this carpenter's tale has stood the test of time and continues to captivate people in our modern, meme-filled world.
Picture this: a pregnant woman and her husband desperately seeking a place to crash for the night. No, it's not the plot of a bad rom-com, it's the beginning of Jesus' story. Mary and Joseph, after being turned away from every Airbnb in Bethlehem, end up in a stable. And that's where Jesus makes his grand entrance into the world. Talk about humble beginnings. It's like being born in a Walmart parking lot, but with more hay and farm animals. Shortly after his birth, King Herod, feeling threatened by rumors of a new king of the Jews, decides to pull a move straight out of a villain's playbook. He orders all baby boys in Bethlehem to be killed. Yikes. Fortunately, Jesus and his parents managed to escape to Egypt. You can read St. Matthew in the Bible for the full story. Fast forward a few years, and we find Jesus as a precocious 12-year-old schooling the religious teachers in the temple. His parents, who had accidentally left him behind, Home Alone Jerusalem edition, are both relieved and amazed when they find him. As Jesus grows into adulthood, he takes up his earthly father's trade and becomes a carpenter. Around the age of 30, he steps into the spotlight and begins his ministry, and that's when things really start to get interesting.
All right, picture this. A crowd of people gathered on a hillside, eagerly waiting to hear what this charismatic new teacher has to say. It's like a TED Talk, but without the fancy lighting and PowerPoint presentations. This, my friends, is the setting for one of Jesus' most famous speeches, the Sermon on the Mount. And let me tell you, Jesus didn't come to play. He came to slay with some serious wisdom. He starts off with the Beatitudes, a series of blessings that flip the script on what people thought it meant to be blessed. Blessed are the poor in spirit, he says, and you can almost hear the collective "say what now" from the crowd. But Jesus doesn't stop there. He goes on to tackle some heavy topics like anger, lust, divorce, and loving your enemies. You have heard it said, "An eye for an eye," Jesus tells the crowd, but I say to you, turn the other cheek. The real kicker comes when Jesus teaches his followers how to pray. He introduces what we now know as the Lord's Prayer, which is basically the ultimate cheat sheet for talking to God. But perhaps the most revolutionary part of the sermon is when Jesus tells people to love their enemies and pray for those who persecute them. Do you know why he said this? Can you explain it? I think maybe because it is not the individual but the spirit that dominates in the body. So praying for them is to expel that unrighteous spirit and set that captive body, the temple of the living God, free. It's a mic drop moment that still challenges us today. Loving your enemies? That's harder than trying to fold a fitted sheet or understanding the plot of Inception. But that's Jesus for you, always pushing us to think about what he is telling us, and he wants us to look deeper even when it seems impossible.
Come now, walking on water and other party tricks, Jesus' miracles. Now let's talk about Jesus' miracles, because this guy wasn't just all talk. He had some serious skills to back it up.
We're talking water into wine, walking on water, calming storms. Jesus was like a one-man magic show, but with way better special effects. And the best part, no smoke and mirrors, folks. This was the real deal.
Let's start with the water into wine trick at the wedding in Cana. Picture this. You're at a wedding, the party's in full swing, and suddenly, oh no, they run out of wine. But Jesus, being the clutch player he is, steps in and turns 6 stone jars of water into the finest wine. It's like he invented the open bar. I can just imagine the bride and groom's relief. Thank God you're here, Jesus. Literally.
But Jesus wasn't just about keeping the party going. He also had a knack for feeding large crowds with minimal resources. Take the feeding of the 5,000, for example. Jesus takes 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish and somehow manages to feed a crowd of 5,000 men, plus women and children. It's like the world's most impressive picnic.
And let's not forget about the walking on water incident. The disciples are out on a boat, a storm hits and they're freaking out. Suddenly, they see Jesus casually strolling across the waves like it's no big deal. Peter, always the eager beaver, asks if he can try it too. Jesus says sure, and for a hot second, Peter's doing it. But then he looks down, realizes what he's doing and starts to sink. Jesus, ever the lifeguard, pulls him up and basically says, dude, you gotta have faith. It's a powerful lesson, but also a reminder that if Jesus invites you to try walking on water, don't forget to keep your faith focused on him because he is the wind beneath your wings. These miracles weren't just party tricks, they were profound signs of his divine authority. Now, about the Last Supper, history's most memorable dinner party. All right, folks, it's time to talk about the dinner party to end all dinner parties, the Last Supper. This wasn't just any meal. This was Jesus' final hangout with his disciples before things got real.
Picture the scene. Jesus and his 12 disciples are gathered in an upper room in Jerusalem. The mood is tense. Jesus knows what's coming, but the disciples are blissfully unaware that they're about to witness the birth of a new religious tradition. During the meal, Jesus does something that would change the course of religious history. He takes a piece of bread, breaks it, and says, "This is my body, which is given for you." Then he takes a cup of wine and says, "This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." The disciples are probably thinking, Jesus, buddy, are you feeling okay? That's definitely bread and wine. But little did they know, they were witnessing the institution of what would become known as the Eucharist or communion. But wait, there's more. In the middle of this solemn meal, Jesus drops another bombshell. "One of you will betray me," he announces. Can you imagine the tension? The disciples start frantically asking, "Is it me? Is it me?" Meanwhile, Judas is probably sweating bullets. It's a dinner party with more drama than a reality TV show.
The betrayal, trial and crucifixion things get real. All right, folks, buckle up because things are about to get intense. We're entering the part of Jesus' story that's less walking on water and more Game of Thrones finale.
It all kicks off in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus goes to pray after the Last Supper. He's feeling the weight of what's to come, asking God if there's any way to avoid it.
While Jesus is having his moment, Judas shows up with a posse of armed men. And how does he identify Jesus? With a kiss. Talk about a betrayal. Jesus gets arrested. And suddenly, all those disciples who were ride or die at dinner, they're scattering faster than teenagers when the cops show up at a house party.
Next up, it's trial time. Jesus gets shuffled between religious leaders and Roman officials like a hot potato nobody wants to handle. The religious leaders are all, "This guy claims to be the Son of God." And Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, is like, that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. But eventually, under pressure from the crowd, Pilate caves and sentences Jesus to crucifixion.
The crucifixion itself is brutal. Jesus is forced to carry his own cross through the streets of Jerusalem. Jesus is nailed to the cross, and even in his final moments he's still dropping wisdom. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," he says. Here you can see he practices what he preached when he asks us to pray for our enemies and our persecutors. He asked his Father to forgive his killers. As Jesus breathes his last, the sky darkens and the earth shakes. It's like even nature itself is saying, "Whoa, this is heavy stuff." And just like that, it seems like the story is over. But remember, folks, this is Jesus we're talking about. He's got one more trick up his sleeve, and it's a doozy. Stay tuned. No joke, the comeback kid, resurrection and its impact. Just when everyone thought it was game over for Jesus, he pulls off the ultimate plot twist. 3 days after his crucifixion, some women go to his tomb to anoint his body. But surprise, surprise, the tomb is empty, and there's an angel chilling there like it's no big deal. The angel's basically like, oh, Jesus. Yeah, he's not here. He's risen.
Now imagine being one of Jesus' disciples at this point. You've just gone through the emotional roller coaster of seeing your leader arrested, crucified, and buried. Then suddenly, bam! Jesus shows up, very much alive, and is all, peace be with you.
Over the next 40 days, Jesus pops up here and there, appearing to his disciples and other followers. He's like the world's most holy game of whack-a-mole. One minute he's walking through walls to surprise his disciples, the next he's having a beachside BBQ and asking Peter if he loves him.
The impact of the resurrection can't be overstated. It's the cornerstone of Christian faith, the ultimate I told you so moment. For believers, it's proof that Jesus wasn't just a good teacher or a miracle worker, but truly divine.
The resurrection turned a group of scared, scattered disciples into bold preachers willing to face death themselves. And it's the reason why, 2,000 years later, billions of people around the world are still talking about this carpenter from Nazareth. Please check him out. He is all over in the Holy Bible. Read about him and find him for yourself. It is not what the preacher man says, but what he said in Matthew 7, verses 7 and 8. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened.